Blog Talk Radio.
All right, everybody, welcome back to this week's edition of the Pickle Ian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and back with me this week is my partner in crime, the Judge. Judge Chaffee. Ray, glad you're back.
It's good to be back. This has been a hit-and-miss year. I've had to miss a few shows this year. I keep getting sick or traveling or something like that. So good to be back in the co-captain's chair.
Yeah, it's always nice to mix it up. It's great to do a show with Steve, and as we made note of last week, Steve, Ray, and I we played in a fantasy football league for about 10 years. That we're no longer playing in that, but now we're playing as part of the Kick-Ass team. So it's great. It's always nice to do the show with him. It's nice to do the show with the boss every now and then. But I do miss I do miss the Judge. So I'm glad to have him back this week and have another great show.
This is where the magic happens.
It's not the only place the magic happens, so let's not get into that right now. But let us get into any phone calls you may have, questions, 877-511-1024. And I'm hoping the Judge is running the chat board, as my technical difficulties with my Kindle, it's not dynamic. So unlike this radio show, it's not dynamic. So
hint taken. I am on the chat board.
There you go. All right, and it was an extremely odd week, I think, in fantasy football. A lot of low-scoring games. The best games of the week were all on Thursday, and I have a question for you, Judge, and it's about Thursday games. I mean, I always try to look at things from a football fan perspective and from a fantasy perspective. And from a fan perspective, especially the Thanksgiving games, I love them. I mean, you got to love them. Any Thursday night game, I think it's great. Get more football, but from a fantasy perspective, it's a little bit difficult for me. I'm not as crazy about them from a fantasy perspective. Makes it a little rush judgments, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that on Thursday night games. I
mean, yeah. First of all, if they were a lot of action in those games, a lot of big players going, some huge performances. I think particularly over Thanksgiving, it's just tough. It's tough to really get your arms wrapped around it. I was traveling, family, friends, and it's sort of somewhere trying to squeeze in your fantasy football lineup setting, and everyone's giving you like the evil eye and staring you down in the house, in the room. So I think that makes it tough as far as your prep time. I wouldn't trade it. It's nothing beats having the games on Turkey Day, but it does make fantasy a little tough.
Yeah, so it's again, I'm a football fan and been a football fan a lot more than a fantasy player. So three great games. I think that up until Monday night, the top 6 scorers were all from Thursday night games, and a lot of low action on Sunday games. And I think the most surprising of which was Green Bay just really not bringing it to New York. And I'm wondering, is it just kind of a 1-week thing? Does New York sort of own Green Bay? They seem to have their number a lot, beating them on the road to get to the Super Bowl a couple times, and that was, I think, the most interesting game of the week.
Well, it was surprising. The Giants had not looked as good. Eli had looked terrible coming into this game, and Green Bay looked like they, it's one of those things. They looked like they were clicking in. They maybe looked like they were again the best team in the NFC. It might be the Giants have their number. It seems like there's something either that Coughlin has, it's in their head, but yeah, it's and boy, I mean, are we going to start to see another like late season Giants move again and into the playoffs? It's becoming it's becoming if you're not a Giants fan, it's becoming a little painful to deal with for those Giants fans out there. It's I'm sure they're sitting back saying, okay, bring it on.
Yeah. So anyhow, a few weeks left to sort all that out. The Giants have a couple division games left. No matter how good or bad the NFC East teams are in general, it's never easy playing when they play each other. So we'll see how they fare. Right now, they look to be in the driver's seat for the NFC East title and a lock to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and we'll talk more during the show. clearly the Eagles are not at all in the picture, and I don't expect Dallas is really going to be in the picture either. Washington's getting much more interesting with RG3, but yeah, the Giants are they're in the driver's seat. I'd be very surprised if they don't take home the division. They can really sort of cement it this week against Washington. I know. Hiss. Boo.
All right. Well, enough on that. And and staying with the NFC East, I as you know, I was at the Philly game on Monday night last night. It was actually very exciting. We had 3 generations of Prevos that were at the link for the first time. I took my father and my 2 older sons, and we had a great time. The kids loved it. It was very exciting. The Boo Birds were definitely out in full force. A few bits of colorful language flying, I won't even say here and there, pretty much most of the game, and in the walk back to the car. So, but all in all, it was a great experience. The field's fantastic. I don't know if there's a bad seat in the house. We were up pretty high, and you could see the whole field. So it was a great experience. And so, it's a shame that the Eagles had to give the performance they did, because I think it took a little bit away from it. But other than that, I can't wait to go back.
Well, so you got to give us the pulse, John, of the Eagle fan. We have our big bonfire coming up with the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football team in the Piccadilly Inn, December 2nd for the Eagles-Dallas game. And this is, it's a whole different dynamic this year with the Eagles. I mean, this is the first time in 13, 14 years where, last year, I guess, but it was still new, and I mean, they're legitimately out of it. I mean, this is really about, like, how high are they going to draft this year. And the natives are getting restless. You see the bags on people's heads. You see some of the empty seats. It's, so it'll be a whole different experience as bonfire. It actually will be fun for those that, like the talk radio type atmosphere, because there'll be a lot of bitching and complaining going on.
Yeah, it'll still be fun. The mood, you could just tell when you walked in the stadium that people expected the Eagles to lose. And I think it's the first time in years that, they don't even have a chance to make the playoffs this year. And it's the first time in years that's happened. You always had that tinge of, well, they could go on a run and squeak in at least.
Even last year, there was some crazy scenario that could happen going into that last game where they could have snuck in the playoffs. No,
it was quite plausible, and they played well down the stretch. And frankly, you think they should have gotten in. Obviously the Giants proved that they belonged and they deserved, but yeah, this year there's just none of that. And even when they ended up taking a lead, you just had that area of inevitability that they were going to lose it, and it's just a shame that had to happen that way. The great performance from Bryce Brown, but of course he fumbled the ball twice. So everything, and every time they seem to have something going, they turn the ball over. So it was what it was, I guess, and it wasn't a great performance from the Eagles. And frankly, that brings up another question. And I know we've talked about it before, but I've always, we've talked about Andy Reid, and he's gone at the end of the year. But I'll be honest with you, after that performance, I don't think he should coach another game, whether it's for him, for the team, for the fans, whatever. I just think they're done. They just didn't seem to fight for him.
That's certainly the popular belief right now in Philadelphia, I think. I think at least the vocal may be becoming more of a majority than minority. Think he needs to get out of here. His time is done. It actually might be sort of like a mercy move at this point, because it's just they're sort of like they're walking dead right now. I don't know what you gain really by letting him go now. You can put Marty Morningway in charge for a few weeks. I think the only thing that I would look to, they have to play the young guys. So if Reed went away from that, and most relevantly with Mike Vick, if Vick's back and he actually puts Vick in instead of Foles, I think he has to go, because you have to use these 5 games to see what you have. So I'm fine with him staying. It's clear, I think, to everyone he'll be gone at the end of the year. But he has to sort of take the best interest of the organization at heart here and get guys in about looking towards the future.
Yeah, I'm not one of those Andy Reid haters. I think he's done an admirable job over the years. Obviously, you've won a Super Bowl. I think the play calling's got a little stale, a little predictable. But I mean, look at his track record, all the the NFC at the Super Bowl, all the championship games he was in, the playoff wins. Frankly, the only coach that's been better over these years has been Belichick. And you could argue maybe, Coughlin because of 2 Super Bowls, or maybe Tomlin, but from, a playoff win standpoint, I think Andy Reid's got the second most wins out of any coach. So, there's definitely been success there. But I agree. And, right now you have to see what the future stars have.
And with that, John,
that wide receiver right now.
Time's yours.
Sorry?
With that, time's yours.
Oh, time's mine. All right. Anyhow, just one bit of news before we get into some of the for real, and that would be Mike Holmgren has decided to step down in Cleveland, and just kind of want to, it's a big name in sports. The success of Green Bay is so stint in Seattle, and he's done in Cleveland. And I'm just wondering if, in your opinion, does he come back to coaching?
I don't know that he does. It's funny watching, again referencing the Eagles-Carolina game last night. It's, Holmgren's done, but it's almost like the dinosaur extinction, the meteorites. Like you see the whole tree of his, and all those guys. I think Ron Rivera, now Andy Reid. I think all those guys are going to sort of be on their way out. Gruden's in the broadcast booth. They have 4 or 5 guys are all sort of Holmgren guys. And all of them look like they are.
Angie Dundee, Ali's trainer, right next to me, is saying it. You may hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
And down goes the Holmgren, the Holmgren-esque mystique of this lineage of coaching he has. So no, I think he might be done.
Yeah, I think the big thing now is looking for the, young, quote-unquote, energetic guys that, can bring new life into an organization. And I don't think Holmgren's one of those guys. Not saying he won't get another job, but you're right. I mean, maybe that, the fruit has died off the tree and no longer. So
I think the whole tree has died. I think, and all the pieces of fruit that were coming off of that tree are withering as well.
The only name I would say might still be viable, from that aspect is Gruden, and just because you got these successful coaches who step away for a few years. He's still young, and he's kept his name in there for whatever reasons. Obviously, being on ESPN has kept his profile high, and I think if there's one name that's going to stay alive and maybe still have some measure of success as a coach, I think it's Gruden.
Well, he's certainly named and surfaced already in Philadelphia, and I'm sure he'll surface. Every year he surfaces as a possible alternative. So yeah, you're right. I think if he wants to coach, he will get a job.
All right. On that note, let's take a little bit of an early break, and I believe we have Victor back on the line from Fantasy Player Exchange. So we'll take the break, get back with Victor, and then get into our For Real segment. So instead of being a little late for our commercial breaks, we'll go a little bit early. This is Jumpin' John with Judge Ray. Don't forget our call line is 877-511-1024, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Now is your chance to experience the new game that's transforming fantasy sports. Fantasy Player Exchange is a new daily game that allows you to compete against friends and fantasy foes for cash prizes. With FPX, you can select 5 players from any active sport. Sign up now at fantasyplayerexchange.com for your chance to beat ESPN Radio's Henry the Commish Brick and win $1,000 cash. Go to fantasyplayerexchange.com to sign up and play today. Remember, that's fantasyplayerexchange.com.
I'm sexy and I know.
Car Toys, the most innovative car customizing shop in its class. Summer is here, and so's the heat. Better get that remote start so you can cool off in your car in style with your smartphone. Car Toys can install remote start on Mercedes-Benz, push-button start, and stick shift. Reduce that glare with the best 3M window fill. And while you're at it, get your car detailed by Car Toys Detail Department so your ride looks, feels, and smells brand new. Car Toys defines what everything for your car really means, from TV to reality. That's why Car Toys is the leader in the industry in car customization. Car Toys' knowledgeable team are the best in their class. Like Car Toys on Facebook and check them out at distinctivecartoys.com.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Piccolillian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. This is your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, Judge Ray Jaffe by my side, and we have Victor from Fantasy Player Exchange. So, Victor, how you doing? Glad to, good to hear from you again. Let's hear a little bit about Fantasy Player Exchange.
Sure, guys. Well, thanks again for having me on. And FantasyPlayerExchange.com is where you can go to get your daily fix of any fantasy sports. And the best thing about it, it's not exclusively to football. We have multi-sport games. We have football. We have baseball. We're getting basketball by the end of this month. And we're looking forward to, right now we have the college games going for football. And as you know, the championship games start next weekend for football. And then there'll be bowl games for the next month and a half every single day. So we're very excited about that coming up. And then, obviously, still have the games for football during the week. At this point, Friday, we got Monday night games, Sunday. And we're excited. This is a great season for us.
I think those bowl games might reel in Jumpin' John for good.
I do enjoy just seeing some of the matchups in the bowl games. Obviously you can't watch every one, so that might be the case, right?
So Victor, I think it's probably best for you to speak this week a little bit about the Beat the Commish game that we have running with your site, and maybe tell us about some of the results from this past week.
Sure. Well, this week you were actually, I believe, in second place. You had a great showing. We did have one person beat you. The person who went all in, it looked like on Eli Manning, had the big game. And for those who don't understand how the game plays, it's very similar to just, a fantasy game in general. You want to go with a guy whose stock is low. And Eli Manning, after the prior 2 weeks, was as low as you can possibly get. He was at a $15 price point, where in the past he's been up to $60, $70. And at that point, you had to see that there was a chance that he was going to have a good week. And Eli Manning turned it around.
He did. He had a big game. And we've talked about this before, and it's becoming real. John, really, I'm sure we'll hit on this as the show goes on. I mean, this is, in a lot of fantasy leagues, this is the last week of the regular season. A lot of leagues have 3-week playoffs. Most leagues now, hopefully your league, whoever you are, has disbanded the Week 17 final because so many guys rest. So weeks 14, 15, 16 a lot of times are playoffs. So this is the last regular season week. And then, Victor, after this week, there might be some people that are no longer in their fantasy football leagues. And where should they turn to? Of course.
Correct. That's when they want us to come. We want everybody to come to FantasyPlayerExchange.com and check us out. because once you're in the playoffs, and if your team is hopefully not knocked out, but if it is get knocked out, you still want to be able to have that chance to play with a team, and you get to pick your own players. You're not picking an entire team. You're picking 5 players from any active multi-sport, and it's daily. You don't have to worry about guy has a bad game. You know what? It's one day. The next day you can go for somebody else.
And it's a low fix going. So it does keep the fix going between the seasons, especially if you do a fantasy playoff. There's usually a couple-week lull between the end of your regular season and when the fantasy playoffs start. So it's a great filler, and as the judge can attest, once you play, you're hooked.
Yeah, I've played every week since I started, and I think I'm sure I'll continue to play even after football season. I'm a big baseball junkie as well, so that might be when I really start to get back involved. And it's a fun game, all kinds of price points as well. So that's important for I think the people to realize is, if you're sort of a little more aggressive, there's $25, I think even $50 games. But if you just want to do it for some fun as a flyer, there's $1, $2 games. So it sort of runs the gamut.
Correct, and for the last few weeks of the season, we still have the Beat the Commish game, which everybody seems to be doing. So that's great. So the Beat the Commish game right now is a game that I really want everybody to go check out. We are still doing the promotion. If you go sign up at fantasyplayerexchange.com, you'll get $10 free to play. And we hope that you play the Beat the Commish game to see if you can outsmart the commish.
Yeah. Well, really, how hard is that to do? I mean, come on now.
Well, it's showing it doesn't seem to be as difficult as I imagined at the beginning, but he's had a few good showings, but he has not won 1 week yet, and he's still got a few weeks to go.
If you can put your pants on in the morning, you can outsmart the commish. Whoa, where is he? Is he out there today?
Wow.
Well,
your lack of faith disturbing.
As Victor, you might have realized by now, I know John certainly knows, whatever we can do to entice or provoke the commish to get involved in our show, we look for those opportunities.
I totally understand.
It's more fun railing on them in person than waiting for a response. So
I'm sure. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for having me on again, and I look forward to speaking to you guys next week.
All right, no problem.
Thanks, Victor.
I appreciate you coming on.
Fantasy Player Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.
All right, and Ray, I do believe we have our old friend Jersey in the house back on. He's on hold. So let's see what Jersey has to say.
Dial him up.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Jersey, how you doing?
Hey, my brother, Kenny Gurus. How you guys doing? Not too bad.
Jersey, how are you?
Not bad. 8-4 in both leagues, tied for first. I win both games this week. Then I get a bye, and I win some money. Here's my dilemma. I got 2 questions. In my standard league, you have basically Michael Bush left, who I dropped a long time ago, and Reggie Bush left in there. Because what I have is I have Trent Richardson, I have McFadden on an IR, I have Bryce Brown, who lived up for me. I got the weekly high. I have Sean Green, but I have Andre Brown, who I'm going to drop. So out of those 2 guys, which one do I take first? Do I take Michael Bush first or Reggie Bush first? And then I got my PPR question, then I'll be done. What you got? What do you think?
Now, how many running backs are you starting?
You start 2, but you can carry 4 active, and you can have you'll have 2 IR people, but you have to have at least 4 active running backs, but 2 start. And this is the last week to pick up players because in our retarded league, after week 13 in this league, you can't pick up any people off the waiver wire unless your whole running backs are depleted.
All right, so Ray, I'll let you answer first. My answer might surprise you a little bit, but let's hear what you have to say.
So Jersey, it sounds like you're stuck between 2 bushes.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Without the lights.
Bad place to be.
Not a bad place to be.
Right? Yeah.
So you know what I'm doing? Actually, I'm panning a little bit ahead here to look at some things, and I'll tell you what. Just because what your question is really about, who do you need to put onto your roster? Because you can't make any more roster moves. I think you got to go with Reggie Bush. I'm just looking at the matchups, especially if you get a bye. In weeks 15 and 16, Miami has Jacksonville, and then Miami has Buffalo. Both not good against the run. Both real opportunities for Reggie Bush. I mean, Forte already thinks he might be playing this week. Chicago has Green Bay one of those weeks, which is not a great running back matchup because you have to go to the air too often against Green Bay. They have Arizona the other week, which has been a relatively tough defense. So I just think from a matchup play, sort of rolling the dice a couple weeks out, who might give me more, I'd go with Reggie Bush.
I'm actually going the same direction. I think Michael Bush is 1 week play at best, and let's face it, he's playing Seattle, which they lost their 2 top cornerbacks, so his suspension, I'm not sure if it's going to occur this week or not. If it does, Cutler's just going to pick up, when we go through the air a lot more. Either way, they're a tough run defense. So I think you got to roster someone, you got to roster Reggie.
Okay, I'll do that there. And then my PPR league, here's what I got, my last question. It's not a bad backfield. I used to have Michael Bush, but I dropped him last week to pick up Cecil Shorts. But here's what I got. I have Forte. I have Ridley. I've been going Ridley and Forte pretty much every week. I have Ryan Matthews. And I also have DeMarco Murray, who I picked up a couple weeks ago when somebody dropped him. So it's not bad, but they're all hurt. Out of that group there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep Cruz. I'm going to keep Julio Jones. I played him this week. My man went off like the misfit for Chris Vaughn. I beat this guy pretty good. And then Cecil Shorts I have. So I'm going to drop Demarius Moore. But in this league, it's the PPR, 10-point rushing touchdown. You have Michael Bush available. You also have Beanie Wells available. You have you have Thomas from Miami who's available. You have Jennings who's available, and you also have Noshawn Moreno. So between Michael Bush, Chris, Beanie Wells, Noshawn, T. Thomas, or Jennings, how would you rank them for picking up? Because I'm like picking 9 out of 12.
Gosh, it's again, are you talking for just the week, or are you talking for the rest of the season?
Well, the rest of the season, I was thinking Michael Bush only because I have Forte. But Chris Wells seemed to have, I need to win this week to get a bye in this league here. The other CBS league, there are no buys. You start week 14, 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7. They do it that way. But in this league, I get about $200 for winning the division, and I don't play till week 15.
Yeah, so
week 14.
I mean, as much as we love Bush on this show, I think Bush has. I think Bush is your least option. I'd rank Bush 5th, just because it might be a 1 week wonder, and you're really only banking on the touchdowns. I realize that 10 points per touchdown, and that's what you want him for. I'm not really sure he's going to do much for you. I mean, I think Moreno's got to be first on that one, just because of the weekly potential for that. So, Judge, what do you think?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I lean a little bit more towards Beanie Wells. I think actually, it's just kind of looking at the guy who it really is the primary ball carrier. The reliable primary ball carrier. I think it's going to be Beanie Wells in that group. Right. And I'm looking at his Week 15 matchup against Detroit. It's not a bad matchup. It's a possible play if you would need him for that. Week 16 is a tough matchup in the finals, so that's against Chicago, so that would be a bit of a black mark. But I think I would go Wells, and I've always sort of been intrigued with Moreno's potential. If he gets the opportunities, I think, especially with a PPR league, he does catch out of the backfield. So I sort of like Wells and Moreno.
All right.
Wells is my second too. So
because I don't know if Forte's going to play this week. I don't know if DeMarco Murray's going to play. Because if not, then I got to go with Ridley, who's got a tough matchup against Miami. Then you got Ryan Matthews, who's a good running back, but you don't know how San Diego's going to use him. You know what I mean? So that's why I want one of those guys that maybe I could plug and play this week. If Forte's out and DeMarco Murray's out, then I could choose between one of them, Ridley, and Ryan Matthews. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you, if you're looking for this week, I'll give away something. My sleeper for this week is Rashad Jennings. So I really like Jennings against Buffalo this week. So if you're looking for a 1 week play, I would actually go in that direction.
All right. All right, I give this a good thing. I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate it very much. You guys have got me to 8-4 in both leagues, so I'm going to see what I can do. Give it a shot. Hopefully, I can win both.
Good luck as always, Jersey.
We'll look for our,
thanks, guys.
We'll look for our cut later, Jersey. All right.
I will, man.
Jersey, you know what you got to do? You got to find your way to the Piccadilly Inn for some free wings and a bonfire on the 2nd.
I'll give you guys some wings, man. That's what I'm saying. Hey, you're right there for 206. I used to hunt not far, right there from the old Atzine Lake. Down. I know exactly where you guys are at. You know what I mean?
Swing by, get some free food, and say hello to the crew.
I will. Now, what nights are you down there? What nights so I can? I'll on the calendar.
There's a special bonfire that the Kick-Ass crew is going to be down there on December 2nd. So it's this Sunday night game with Dallas. The festivities start at 6, so please be there.
I'll get Junior and I'll bring him down. Take
Do
care.
it.
Cool. All right,
guys.
Jersey.
Yep.
See you, Jersey.
Have a good one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Well, all right. So tell you what, Judge, that brings us up to our next break. And good call from Jersey. Good luck to him. And we'll be back in 2 minutes. Our call-in line is 877-511-1024. This is the Piccadilly Inn Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. We'll see you in 2 minutes.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
We're famous for our buffalo wings. The Piccadilly. When it comes to cooking wings, we're the king. The Piccadilly. Pull up a chair, grab a table, enjoy the atmosphere. Have something good to eat or have yourself around here. If you can't stop in, stop back. Great food, great drinks where everybody is a friend. If you can't stop in, stop back. The Piccadilly Inn.
It isn't fall without the famous Piccadilly Inn. Catch all of your favorite football action at the Piccadilly Inn. Check out the Pick's brand new menu featuring homemade buffalo chicken egg rolls, buffalo shrimp, scallops, and the tender Pick burger. They go great with one of the Pick's ice-cold on-tap beers. Catch every football game at the Pick. Enjoy an awesome meal while you watch your favorite team. The Piccadilly Inn, a Jersey tradition since the 1920s. On Route 206 in Chemong. If you can't stop in, stop back.
The Piccadilly Inn.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Piccadilly Inn Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. This is your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and Judge, are you on?
I am on.
All right, just checking. I'm a little technical difficulties, so I just want to make sure that we're all doing good.
We are all present and accounted for,
and that's nice. That's really nice. So. Half an hour in the show, and we've barely even started. So let's get right to it. A couple questions for you, and a lot of interesting action from some not as well-known players, or we should say some players who haven't demonstrated this year. So I got to ask you, a couple quarterbacks. Joe Flacco, 30 for 51 and 355 yards. Is he for real?
Well, Flacco is. Flacco comes up a lot on our show. He's so hit and miss. Some weeks he plays the leading role of an actual number one quarterback. Some weeks he actually does more harm than good. So I steer clear of Flacco. I think Flacco is totally a matchup play. For this week coming up against Pittsburgh, I actually don't like Flacco. Partly because of Pittsburgh's defense, partly because of Pittsburgh's what looks like they're really sort of an inability to move the ball with their backup quarterback situation, and I just don't know that Baltimore's going to have to go to the air that much. So don't love Flacco this week.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's had 2 300-yard games in his last 5, and the other 3 he's only averaged 150 yards. So he's definitely hit or miss. Whether it's truly matchups or just how the game flow dictates, if you're going to use Flacco, I'm looking at maybe his week 14 at Washington and week 15 at Denver or against Denver that you may be able to use him. But at this point, it's really only insurance if your quarterback goes down. The other interesting quarterback, Russell Wilson, he's one of the least talked about rookies. 21 for 27, 224 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So it's Russell Wilson for real.
Well, least talked about, but not on this show. I mean, if and for those that maybe have stuck with us all year, we were talking up Russell Wilson before he was even named the starting quarterback in training camp when it looked like it was Matt Flynn's job to lose.
Matt Flynn battle, yeah.
Yeah, we've liked Wilson on this show for a while. Sort of always undervalued, smaller guy, but has always succeeded. So, I mean, Wilson, again, matchup play. This is not the week to play Wilson. I feel pretty strongly about that against the Bears. No, I mean, is he for real? Yes, I think he's a nice quarterback. He can have some good games. He can run a little bit as well. Would not get near him this week against the Bears.
And I think, always looking to the future as well. He's not a starting quarterback this year, but of interest for Russell Wilson, he's had multiple touchdowns in his last 4 games and 5 of his last 6. So if you do need that emergency fill-in due to injury, you could do a lot worse than Russell Wilson. 2 touchdowns and 225 yards. It's going to score you some fantasy points. It's not necessarily going to win you the game on his own, but he's not going to lose it for you either.
No, and he's also usually good for at least a few points, if not more, with his feet. So he scores some points. It's funny you threw his name out as for real because I really don't think he's for real this week. As a spoiler alert.
Oh, there we go. Getting hit. Okay. Okay, let's get down to it. Let's talk Bush.
I think we talked enough Bush with Jersey, but we can always talk more Bush.
Is there ever too much Bush? That's the question. You know what? I really do need to be careful. My parents do actually listen to this show, so maybe I should tell them. But yeah, of course, my mom might not actually get the reference, but my pop sure will.
Yeah.
Michael Bush, 21 rushes for 60 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, and I'm going to be writing about him in my If Only column as well. My theme for this week is the 10 steps to losing your mind, or at least losing your fantasy matchups, and part of it is not only seeing Bush vulture 2 touchdowns, but then noticing Forte got hurt. Of course, I'm driving home at the time and had no clue, but. So what do you make of Michael Bush and how, obviously he's had some success in the past. So if he's a starter,
Bush is, as a starter, Bush is a great possibility. I mean, the problem is Matt Forte's a damn good running back, and if Forte's healthy, he's gonna play. Bush can still get some goal line carries. He'll still get some, he'll still get some touches, but. It's not, he's not going to be taking Matt Forte's job. So Forte thinks he can play this week. It's not a great matchup either way. I mean, I was talking about Russell Wilson against Chicago, but Seattle's defense has been pretty good as well. You referenced earlier their corners may be out, depending on what happens with the suspension, so it might change the Chicago game plan. So I think the thing with Bush is if you have a roster spot for him, and he's the clear starter, he's almost a must start. But it's real risky business because I think Forte's going to be a game time decision.
The only problem is it's the ankle. I believe he hurt earlier in the season, so it's possible they sit him down. We'll talk about Bush a little bit later in the show, possibly. So, hint. Shane Vereen, 10 rushes for 42 yards, so it's about 40 yards per carry. 2 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. Clear backup to Ridley, but how clear is that backup role? And is Shane Vereen for real?
I think it's a pretty clear backup role. I really think Ridley's the guy. Ridley had the 10 carries for 42 yards, but that was also in a very lopsided 49-19 game. So Ridley was the guy. Ridley still had the 21 carries, 97 yards, touchdown. I mean, of course, Vereen had the 83-yard touchdown run, which really inflated the stats. Solid backup running back, but at this point in the season, week before the playoffs, into the playoffs, Vereen should not be, with the bye weeks behind us, Vereen should not be on a starting roster.
All right. A running back who should be on the starting roster, I believe. Wouldn't have said that earlier in the year, but let's get your take. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. 19 rushes, 129 yards, and a touchdown. Did he take advantage of Oakland? Is he for real?
I agree. He's for real. He's solid. He's not spectacular. That's probably about as spectacular as the law firm of Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis gets. But the Cincinnati offense has been, Andy Dalton has been playing very well. A.J. Green, of course, is a monster. And, it just has freed up some other things. So, yeah, I mean, he's for real. I wouldn't put him as a 1. He could be a 2. He does have back-to-back 100-yard games against pretty weak defenses, Kansas City and Oakland. I still think if you're playing Green Ellis, you need to think in terms of 7, 8 points, 9 points, and anything above that's going to be some gravy.
Let me couch my earlier comments. Anytime you have a starting running back who's going to get upwards of 20 carries a game, I do believe he needs to be in the lineup. But you're right. He's definitely not an RB1. Not even sure he's an RB2, but their offense is clicking of late.
It is, and it really is clicking.
Yeah. So as you said, the better passing game opens up the running lanes a little bit more. But just let's get the facts out here. He had 129 yards this week. He had over 100 yards last week. They are his only 200-yard running games. So, it was the week against Kansas City you mentioned. So, little caveat there. He is more of a plotter. And so I don't think he's going to break open too many times. So
plotter, I like it. That's a great. That's what he is. Whatever a plotter is, that's what he is. 22 carries, 73 yards, and if you're lucky, he gets a touchdown.
There you go. That sounds about right. All right, I'm going to throw 3 names out at you. 3 wide receivers. Devin Best, he had 7 receptions for 129 yards and on 9 targets. Pierre Garçon, he had 5 receptions on 7 targets, 93 yards and a touchdown. And Mohamed Sanu, 5 receptions, only 29 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he's had touchdowns in his last 3 games. So why don't you tell me which of them, if any of them or all of them are for real, then maybe why don't you put you on the spot and rank them a little bit.
So it's funny. This doesn't usually happen. I actually, at least for this week coming up, I actually like all 3 of them. Bess has, it's a bad team matchup, but a good fantasy matchup against New England. You figure Miami's going to have to take to the air, as we always talk about against New England. So just by default, there's going to be a lot of passes thrown. I think he'll get decent numbers. Now Garçon, Garçon really came into the year as a number 1. Got hurt. Now he's back. I think him and RG3 will click right through it. So Garçon, he is for real. I think and the way RG3's been playing, he's really for real. Sanu, I like. We were talking about Cincinnati just a minute ago. A.J. Green is sort of getting to this point in the world where you almost look to see who's his opposite number because he's getting so much attention. It's just going to free up. It's certainly going to draw the best or even double coverage away from the other side of the field. So I do think Sanu, who is a promising young player, has an opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I actually, and I agree with that, but I think the interesting movement, so to speak, to watch now is whether he actually gets a little bit more attention, and maybe that opens some more passing up for Gresham, maybe some more touchdown opportunities. Because coming into the year, Gresham was seen as a clear number 2 option. I think maybe Sanu has passed him on that, at least on the goal line, but that may open things up more for the tight end. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati is on the cusp of having, frankly, a pretty dynamic offense. Honestly, BGE, if he was a little more dynamic of a runner, they would be a handful. I mean, Dalton's certainly proven to probably be, it's funny the way this year's turned out. I'm not sure that Dalton doesn't look like maybe the best quarterback from last year's class, which we wouldn't have said after last year. I like Cincinnati. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I like Cincinnati. I like them this week against San Diego. I think they're going to continue to put up some pretty good fantasy offensive numbers.
But they control their own destiny in regards to the playoffs. Right now, they're on the outside looking in. Pittsburgh owns a tiebreaker, but they play Pittsburgh in either week 15 or week 16. Excuse me. So, actually, it's week let's say either week 16 or week 17. So week 16. So yeah, they're. Sorry, go ahead, Ray.
I was going to say another reason I'm really high on Cincinnati is, this week they have San Diego, who is not a world beater defense. Then they have Dallas, I believe, who is not a world beater defense. And then they have the Eagles, who clearly is not a world beater defense. So their next 3 weeks, they actually have some pretty favorable matchups. They have Pittsburgh in week 16, which is the finals for a lot of leagues. But you should get some pretty good production next 3 weeks out of Bengals players.
I agree with you, and especially again watching. You can't tell you how being there just makes such a difference, and just seeing how wide open those receivers were on the touchdowns. I mean, you see the whole field. When you're just watching it on TV, you say, "Oh, he's open, he scored." When you're watching, we were in the end zone too, and we were in the far end zone. But you're right there looking directly on the field, and there was probably no one within 20 yards from either of them, and either play. And it just anyhow, I can barely even talk about it.
Yeah, so it's not only on TV. Oh, look, he's open. He actually probably had been open for about 3 seconds before that. That's how open he was.
It was amazing. I mean, I think he tied his shoe, bent down, tied his shoe, and stood up. And there. All right.
I'll tell you what. I'm not thinking of his name, but what's the name of the Eagles interim new defensive coordinator? Todd Bowles.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. No one has done more to tarnish their reputation in a few games. I mean, he's making Juan Castillo look like a freaking football Einstein. I mean, the defense is totally tanked since he's taken over.
Well, he's in a little bit of a self-preservation as well, because he made some statements of how basically it was just blown coverage by the defenders, which I think they have some real issues with their safeties more so than the cornerbacks, and that's really coming to light. They really screwed the pooch on getting some good safeties in there. So and teams are just taking advantage of it. But Ray, I can't talk about it anymore. I can't. We're going to go to a break.
We'll move on.
We'll move on, and let's just not talk about it for the rest of the show. So 2 more minutes. We'll be back with the Judge and Jumpin' John. Our call line is 877-511-1024, and we are the Piccoli Inn Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio.
We're famous for our buffalo wings. The Piccoli. When it comes to cooking wings, we're the king. The Piccoli. Pull up a chair, grab a table, enjoy the atmosphere. Have something good to eat or have yourself around here. If you can't stop in, stop back. Great food, great drinks where everybody is a friend. If you can't stop in, stop back. The Piccoli Inn.
It isn't fall without the famous Piccoli Inn. Catch all of your favorite football action at the Piccoli Inn. Check out the Pick's brand new menu featuring homemade buffalo chicken egg rolls, buffalo shrimp, scallops, and the tender Pick burger. They go great with one of the Pick's ice-cold on-tap beers. Catch every football game at the Pick. Enjoy an awesome meal while you watch your favorite team. The Piccoli Inn, a Jersey tradition since the 1920s. On Route 206 in Chemung. If you can't stop in, stop back.
The Piccoli Inn.
Now is your chance to experience the new game that's transforming fantasy sports. Fantasy Player Exchange is a new daily game that allows you to compete against friends and fantasy foes for cash prizes. With FPX, you can select 5 players from any active sport. Sign up now at fantasyplayerexchange.com for your chance to beat ESPN Radio's Henry the Commish Brick and win $1,000 cash. Go to fantasyplayerexchange.com to sign up and play today. Remember, that's fantasyplayerexchange.com.
fantasy football. The Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. Every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. Join the professor, the commish, and fantasy insider Matt Lowry for the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. Got a question? Call us. Who should you start? Who should you trade? Who's great? And who just plain The Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. On the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com. Yeah, kickassfantasyfootball.com. And every Sunday at 9 a.m.
I felt that one way up here.
Right here on 97.3 ESPN.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pickle Ian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. Ray, we got about 10 minutes left. Let's go over the injuries real quick. We talked about a lot of them already, and then we'll get into studs, and sleepers. We'll bury the professor for his picks and take a few picks from our
I've been looking forward to that segment the entire show.
All right, so let's do it real quick. So we talked about Matt Forte. He has an ankle injury. I'd say it's 50-50 at this point if he gets back, and we talked about his replacement, Michael Bush, and how much we love Bush. So go grab some Bush while you can.
Yeah, but watch that one. Forte is already saying he thinks he'll be able to play. I think that's going to really come down to a game time decision. Makes it tough for fantasy owners.
It does make it tough. Andre Brown, he broke his fibula. He's out for the season. I had him. We were talking about some of my hard luck fantasy, of course. When I write about it every week in my if only column, I lost by 7 points in my one league. I had Andre Brown go down right when he was churning out some garbage time yards, and then I had Sean Jackson go out of the game, and I ended up losing by 7 points. So Andre Brown's out. David Wilson may pick up some slack, but honestly, I think Bradshaw just takes more of the work that he already owned at the number one.
Yeah, I think it's a big boost for Bradshaw owners.
Ed Dixon, tight end for Baltimore, he had a knee injury. Dennis Pitta was injured. He's back. He had 6 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. So if you're looking for some tight end help, Dennis Pitta's back on the fantasy radar.
Especially in a PPR league, I'd definitely give him a long look.
He first couple games, Dennis Pitta was the hot name, and then he really did nothing for about 8 weeks it seems, and then now he's back. Deshaun Jackson, we talked about his ribs. Funny story. At the game, there's a guy that had gone down, and I guess had gotten some information and come back up. And I asked him, and he said he had a bruised sternum. And I said they actually took an X-ray, and they found out that he had no heart.
It's actually sad, but maybe true. Actually, and the other story was, this is not a real story, but with the way the Eagles season's been going, he was rooting really hard they're going to find something in the MRI.
Well, he's already admitted that when he had the contract situation, he wasn't putting in his full effort. So, frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not sure what his contract situation's like, and but I can't imagine that too many Eagles want him back right now.
It'll be an interesting team. It'll be a very different team next year, I have no doubt.
Yes. And then 3 concussions. Lance Moore, Devin Hester, and Brandon Weeden all went out with a concussion. Lance Moore, New Orleans, we all know Drew Brees just finds who's ever open. So I'm not really sure there's a true replacement for him, but I will say David Thomas had 4 receptions, 24 yards, and a touchdown. So
and makes a fine Frosty.
Yes, he does. Just ask his daughter Wendy. And Bears. I'm not really sure. Obviously you have Marshall, and then you have everyone else, and then Colt McCoy. We could have another Colt sighting. So Colt McCoy could be starting for Brandon Weeden. Avoid at all costs.
Yes.
All right. So let's go over real quick. Let's go over Steve's picks last week. As you know on this show, we like to go out of the box a little bit. So, there's certain studs we're never going to say Arian Foster's a stud. We're never going to say Ray Rice is a stud. We're never going to say Tom Brady's a stud. On that vein, we're never going to have some timeshare running back from the worst rushing team in the league as a dud. So, just having said that, let's go ahead. Who was Steve's stud again last week?
Well, Steve really went outside the box. The professor absolutely needs a dressing down for this. This is not his finest work. He goes with Ray Rice as his stud, which is a violation. And even if you're going to go with Ray Rice,
clear violation.
If you're going to go with Ray Rice as your stud, that means you need about 200 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns from Ray Rice to come back and even, show face and say, well, I just knew he was going to have such a big game. I couldn't resist. Rice had a nice game, but no touchdowns. 160 total yards. It's sort of a Ray Rice game.
But his biggest moment was on that 4th and 29. So there was, I guess you'd say 30 yards. I mean, I've only seen about 28, but we don't need to get into that. But
yes, if you got fantasy points for being on highlight clips, he would have killed it because it was shown about 25 times Sunday, but it was just 29 yards.
And so let's move on to his stud.
Bilal.
That's all we need to say about him.
Powell. So you know what's funny about this? I wish the professor was on. Maybe we'll catch him. Maybe we'll catch him at the Piccalilli Inn for the bonfire. Now Bilal Powell is a guy that he's actually been touting for a couple of years. He really likes him. He sort of is been a big proponent that he's going to wind up taking Sean Green's job. So this year he actually is starting to get some looks, getting a few carries, and then he turns around and makes him his dud. First of all, you can't make a part-time running back your dud. And second of all, he's been spending 2 years building a guy up, only to turn around and make him his dud. As John Gruden said a few weeks ago on Monday Night Football, unbelievable. And even with making him his dud, 40 yards and a touchdown is not very duddish for a part-time running back.
No, that's actually pretty good for a part-time running back. So I do hope our beloved friend Steve is listening. If not, we'll be sure to replay this when we get there. So
we're affiliated with ESPN. I really want to get that. Do you remember it was the Eagles Saints game? I'd love to get that sound. Unbelievable. Remember when he said that with Vic? We should try and get that soundbite. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we get that soundbite. All right. And then his sleeper wasn't a bad sleeper. Ended up leaving the game once or twice with a leg injury. Jalen Parmalee. I think you're going to have a little something to say about that on your studs and sleepers. He had 45 yards rushing. Would have had more if he hadn't had the leg injury, but maybe he's just a little brittle.
Yeah, that's at least I give Steve credit. That's a legitimate sleeper pick. Very legitimate sleeper pick.
All right, so real quick, I had Tony Romo. He did end up with 441 yards and 3 touchdowns, so that's not a bad stud pick. Doug Martin, I had as my dud. He ended up rushing 2 touchdowns, which saved his fantasy performance, but he only had 50 yards rushing on 21 rushes, so I'm not so unhappy with that pick.
I'm giving you kudos for that pick. That's the kind of ballsy pick to expect from the Tuesday night show, not these weak sort of safe picks from our ESPN crew. That was a great pick. I mean, he got the end zone twice, so it's hard to get around that. But you got it right on from his yardage output was not there.
Well, considering a lot of sites are touting him as one of the top 2 running backs, again, 2 short rushing touchdowns, it all counts. But I like to throw caution to the wind, Ray. Caution to the wind. But maybe breaking wind was Ronnie Hillman, 3 rushes, 9 yards. Not a good sleeper pick. So let's go real quick. I think you got some epic matchups of epic proportions to uncover for your studs and sleepers. So why don't you run through them real quick?
All right, so my stud this week, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is going to be my fantasy tip of the year. Jamal Charles, and I would say if you can go get him, and he probably can because he's Kansas City and they stink and he's been off and on this year. If you can go get Jamal Charles, I would go get him. His next 4 weeks, final week of the regular season, the 3 playoff weeks, he has Carolina, Cleveland, Oakland, and Indianapolis. 4 pretty easy matchups. He showed last week that even if the whole team's focusing on the run game because they can't throw the ball, he can still get yardage, can make plays. So I like Jamal Charles not only as my stud this week, but I think he's a huge go-get guy right now for the home stretch.
It's a pretty bold statement. So go ahead, keep going.
My dud is Russell Wilson. We talked about him some. He has had a series of good to very good games, multiple touchdown games, yards through the air. I just think Chicago figures him out this week in Chicago. That defense has been monstrous this year. So I think Russell Wilson's it will really struggle this coming week. And for my sleeper, it seems like we like, sort of taking shots with these Jacksonville running backs. I'm going to go with Rashad Jennings. As we talked about, Julian Parmalee, but he's hurt. I think he's not going to play, so there's really no other choice but Jennings against a really poor Buffalo defense that's second worst against the run in the NFL this year.
Yeah, that'll actually be interesting because obviously Jennings hasn't shown much to date, and Buffalo's rush defense has actually been a lot better towards the later half of the season. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. We'll see how that goes. My stud and sleeper, as we start the show, and I realize I haven't gotten anyone down. I'm making a couple just kind of to make a point. My stud, I'm going with Trent Richardson, and basically, as you alluded to earlier, he's going against Oakland. So Richardson by himself is sort of studly, but when you match him against the Oakland rush defense, he's a true stud of the week. My dud is actually Michael Bush. I'm not sure. I know he's produced in the past. I don't know that he's really done a whole lot with the job that he's been able to this year. And Seattle rush defense is pretty good, and the two cornerbacks are out. And Chicago's just going to try and pass a lot on him. So my dud is Michael Bush. And then my sleeper, I was looking at Tannenhill against New England. I think that would be a good sleeper pick. But I'm making a point with this one, and that's Brandon LaFell against Kansas City. And I'm making that point just because he was targeted so often against Philadelphia. And, again, just because I was at the game and you could see certain things, and it just he looked to get the eye of Cam Newton. So I just want to make that point, Brandon LaFell, and I think he's a good pickup for the rest of the year as well.
Well, maybe Kansas City won't cover him either, like the Eagles, and he'll have a great game.
There you go.
Yeah, it was brutal. Brutal game by the Eagles. Oh, man.
Yeah. So, anyhow, unfortunately, again, we were pressed for time for Studs, Duds, and Sleeper. It is our favorite segment of the week, and just had too much time burying a nice little hole for Steve. We'll see if he can dig his way out when we see him on Sunday.
John, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. It is our time to go, and we will see everyone or talk to everyone next week. This is the Pick Lily In Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost. My partner in crime, Judge Ray Jaffe. Thank you for the hour, and we'll talk to you next week.
Turn out the lights. The party's over.